Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and this is my 2018 DR650, and today I'm going to take the first big steps towards turning this dual sport motorcycle into an adventure bike. And for those of you who've been watching the build series on the DR or the XR650, know that I'm building these bikes to be sort of a lighter weight alternative to the last, I guess, 3 bikes that I've been on, which is a Gen 2 KLR650, a Tenere 700, and then finally the Gen 3 KLR650 that I actually traded one of my viewers for when I picked this bike up. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, the KLR, the XR, and the DR650 are all big bore, single cylinder, dual sport motorcycles that are fairly highway capable. Any of you who are KLR owners know that you do often end up searching for a 6th gear, where the DR650 with the stock gearing anyways, and really the same thing with the XR here, you never really have that problem other than the fact that they don't have a whole lot of wind protection stock. They actually seem to be better bikes on the highway almost. That being said, they do only weigh about 366 pounds and 355 pounds, which out on the high-speed roads can almost be a little bit of a disadvantage in comparison to the KLR, but of course off-road they're much easier, much more fun bikes to ride. The thing is, they really just don't have the wind protection unless you make some sort of aftermarket modification like I did with the Hemisphere Off-Road Rally Dash, which made for an absolutely perfect spot to mount this Carpride CarPlay unit. And if you guys have seen the videos of me out on the XR testing this thing, it really is kind of neat, which is why I want to say a huge thanks to Carpuride for sending out their newer sort of upgraded model from the W702 that I've got on the XR. This is going to have a few more features that we will sort of go over a little bit later on in the video once we take the bike out for a ride. But before we do any of that, of course, we need a place to mount this, and while I could just stick it right to the handlebars on the bike, I think I've got a much better idea that should also take care of my wind protection problem. And I figure because I'm going to have to wire this to the battery anyways, I might as well install my Tusk Lithium battery here. There's quite a few nice things about having a lithium battery in contrast to the old lead acid in there. We'll go over that a bit once we get to installing this and wiring this up. And of course, as always, huge thanks to Rocky Mountain ATV for sending this stuff out to me to test. I definitely could not make videos like this without them. This, however, is not a sponsored product. I purchased it off of Amazon, and just like the other two here, I will have links down in the description that don't cost you guys anything extra, but they are a big portion of the reason that I'm able to make videos like this for you guys. So I definitely appreciate it when you guys take the time to use those links down in the description before you do any of your shopping. Doesn't even have to be any of this stuff. You just have to click on a link, make a purchase, and it quite literally helps me to continue making videos like this. So huge thanks to any of you guys that take the time to use those links before you do your shopping. Now, I know this sort of looks like a weird assortment of parts. I promise it will make a lot more sense once it's on the bike. It will also make a lot more sense why I alluded to the fact that I need it to be able to install this the way that I want it to. And that's because while this does sort of hold the windshield itself, it's also a great spot to mount a CarPlay unit or a GPS. And the funny thing about this kit is I actually ordered it for the 701 Enduro, knowing that the handlebars on here without the risers are just a stock 1 1/8 fat bar, which is of course what I put on all my bike builds, including the DR650 here. But this morning when I went to lay this over the top of my Rocks offset risers, which convert this bike from the 7/8 stock bar to the 1 1/8 shub bar, I realized that this is not the proper size bracket for a fat bar. It's definitely made for a 7/8. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. A little bit disappointing that they don't have their bracketry right, even though it says it would fit the Husqvarna. But one thing that I noticed or realized when I sort of dry fit this is that I would really rather have the windshield, well, down as low as I could possibly get it, or at least not as high as it was going to end up being with the brackets in the position where they would be on top of my Rocks offset risers here. So I think what I'm going to do instead is actually just mount these right on the top of the stock bar clamps, and then mount these on the top, which I know seems sort of goofy, but I can't really think of too much of a reason that it's not going to work, other than the fact that these are sort of stepped down in the front, meaning that the back portion here and the front portion are not going to be level. And I had thought about trying to take this down with a grinder and then some fine tuning, but I think instead, just to sort of dry fit this to make sure everything's going to work out right, I think I'm just gonna use these little stainless steel washers that make up the difference. I did, of course, also have to pick up some longer fasteners because they're gonna have to go all the way through the rocks risers, this, I guess, riser, and then finally down into the dead ends of the stock clamps. And the reason that I mentioned those being dead ends is because I will have to cut quite a bit of the threaded portion of these bolts off just so they actually have somewhere to go in here and I can clamp them down tight. Well, other than that looking a little bit awkward, I'm pretty pleased with how this came out. We do have a bit of interference going on there, so I'm not able to sort of tilt my bars as far forward as I had them previously. I think I should pretty easily be able to move these out of the way. So I'm gonna get this one slid this direction and that one slid that direction, and we'll see how close I can get the bars to the spot that I want them. They definitely are noticeably higher now, and they are sort of higher in the direction that the forks point, if that makes sense, the angle of the rake. So that might throw things off a little bit. I guess we'll see what happens when we take it out for a test ride, but I'm not going to complain too much about having these a little bit higher. I think they'll look a little bit more natural once that windshield is in place. But of course I'm getting ahead of myself there. So with those all in place and tightened down, we can finally put that GPS bar up there. I did have to put some shims in between the outer wraparound portion of the tusk, adventure guards, and the part that clamps onto the handlebars, just because I was getting a little bit close to my banjo bolt there. So everything fit up pretty nicely otherwise, and I've got to say I'm pretty excited to see how this windshield is going to look on here. And there is quite a bit of adjustability built into the design of this. This is sort of all the way up, so if you want the windshield and your GPS mount way up high, we can go up here. Otherwise, if you want it down a little bit lower, you can drop it down to about there. And I think this is about where I'm gonna end up just because of the way that I want the windshield to interface with the headlight cowl. And the shield itself can be purchased in either a dark smoke like I've got it, a light smoke, or a clear. I think this is just gonna look best on this bike, and I think that is gonna be the way that I'm gonna mount it. But the other option here that we could do if you want a little bit more protection around the top due to the sort of beveled out edge at the top, we can mount this in this orientation as well. But I'm going for wind protection plus looks, and I think that is what looks the best. So we'll get some fasteners in this and tighten everything up. Well, I really like how this looks from sort of the rider's perspective, which, I mean, really should be the most important, right? And of course, we've got to go and test if the angle and the position of the windshield is going to be good for blocking the wind and not causing too much buffeting and that sort of thing. I think it would look much better if the windshield was sort of down here a bit more, maybe just above the Suzuki symbol. So what I'm thinking is I could possibly bend this pipe, although I think there's probably not enough left here to get a good bend on, and just bending that down a bit I think would help. It would get the windshield a little bit further forward, but I don't really know if it would be worth it. I think really what I need is basically just a longer section of pipe here that would sort of put the windshield a bit farther forward again, kind of where I want it. So maybe I will try to do that. With a pipe bender in the right material, it wouldn't be all that hard to recreate this in some sort of fashion that I would prefer it in, but I think for now, we'll just roll with this and see how it works out on the road. I think maybe I'll get used to it. It just, I don't know, doesn't blend in, I think, as well as I would like. For right now, we'll just get the Carplay nav unit opened up and installed. So this is the sort of ram ball style mount that I used to mount the other one on the XR, but I don't think we'll be using this today because this also comes with this guy. So this will mount just directly to the back of the unit, and then I can just put this over that GPS bar. At least I think it should fit. Looks like we've got a couple different options, although that doesn't really look like a 1-inch. Take a look at the battery as well. So we get all sorts of this foam because this battery itself is absolutely, I mean, just teeny tiny. The outer case is flame retardant, and this thing is super light. It's like a third of the weight of the battery that I'm gonna pull out here. I mean, there is just absolutely nothing to it. We've got a little tester on the top, and the light is a little bit dim, but you can see we are fully charged. And along with being incredibly tiny, light, able to be mounted upside down on its side, doesn't really matter. They're completely maintenance free. Other than all of that, these will discharge much slower than a standard battery would. It says here less than 5% a month discharge, and beyond that, these can be discharged much farther without any harm to the battery and still within a usable range in comparison to a lead acid battery, which is definitely a good thing for both a motorcycle that might possibly sit around a lot and not be used much, but also it can be extremely helpful and nice on something like this that is built to be a bike that is ridden into the woods and possibly lived off of for a while, meaning that we might need to charge a phone off of it. I might want to run a Carplay unit on it that I might accidentally leave on since I'm going to wire it directly to the battery. There's just a lot of really nice things about them. I've got them in every single one of my motorcycles now except for the Honda. I will be installing one on that bike. I've been putting that off because I actually plan on relocating the battery. And I've heard people say that these aren't good in cold weather, and I guess I was always sort of under that impression too, but the packaging says that they're good down to -4 and up to like 134 Fahrenheit. I don't know about the hot side of things, but I can certainly attest to the fact that this battery worked just fine in my TW200 when it was 0 degrees outside. So let's get this thing in the DR and wired up to the Carplay unit. So I'm definitely going to have to remove this bigger layer in here. And I would assume that this is supposed to sort of damp down the vibrations, which obviously the more we remove, the less vibration damping capacity there's going to be, but I don't know that this is actually going to work. It certainly doesn't seem like it's going to. Yeah, it looks like this is set up for just a hair under a 3/4 inch bar. On the website, it does call out 3 different bar diameters that this mount will fit. So the smallest one is going to be with this insert, the medium one would be with this insert, and the third largest, the 22 millimeter version, would, I guess, just be this completely empty. So since they're basically telling you that you're able to mount this directly to your handlebars, I would think that this thing should be able to handle the vibrations from a GPS bar, even without the silicone dampers. So I guess we'll just set those to the side, roll with this, and hope that the vibrations from the mighty DR don't kill this thing. Actually, speaking of vibrations, I didn't do this with the last one, and one of you guys suggested it, and I think it's an excellent idea. So I'm going to pull these screws out of here, and I'm going to put blue thread locker on them when I put them back in, but I just kind of want to show you guys the weatherization that this thing has. So you can see the printed circuit board in there. We do have a bit of a gasket underneath this bracket here, and this little blue piece is sort of a dampener to this little chip that's underneath it and to kind of keep that from rattling loose. So it seems like they know what they're doing and did a good job. So we'll put that back in. This way we don't have to worry about anything rattling loose. And if you guys are familiar with me and the channel, you know that because of the knobby tires that I run on all my bikes and the sort of thumpy bikes that I ride, I put Loctite on everything. So there's a screw right inside of the ram ball here. I shouldn't call it a ram ball, it's not a ram ball. And then this piece has the edges trimmed down to a flat, and that will interface with the back side of just one of these sections, and it can either be mounted... Oh, I did that wrong. There. So now, with that oriented correctly, I can place this either down here or up here. And that, of course, just allows you to mount this a little bit higher or a little bit lower. I think we'll go with the upper peg hole. So I'll just get this screw out of here, and then I can reuse that there. It does look like they have a bit of sort of dried pre-applied Loctite, but that stuff never seems to quite work the way I want it to. So I'll put a little bit extra on there to help keep that in place. But unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to have to pull the windshield back off of here in order to get this mounted, because the fasteners have to go through the back side of this, and it's going to be pretty hard to get a screwdriver in there. So I guess we'll pull this off. So this seems fairly stable. However, if I just put a little bit more pressure on it, it moves, and I'm already kind of making this a little bit concave because this bar is slightly bigger than the 22 millimeter bar that this is intended for. So I think what I'm going to do is pull this back off of here and just wrap one layer of electrical tape around the bar. That should just add some traction in there so I won't have to tighten these down so much. So I'll get that done, we'll get the windshield installed, and then I'll run the wiring down to the new battery. So definitely a very noticeable difference in size. Luckily the height is not all that much different, so won't have to make up too much in order to get this bracket to sit properly. Seems like that should actually work out pretty well. We'll have to build this side up, and what I prefer to do when I'm installing these is actually stick the foam pads directly to the battery. I think I am also going to pull the tank off just so I can run this wire down the steering neck. So I decided I didn't like this thin little wire just sort of laying in the bottom here, and I didn't really like having this pressed up against anything and being sort of vibrated around in there for the next however many years. So I decided to just sort of hastily wrap the whole thing up, being careful not to sort of pinch this wire anywhere, and then I can sort of just shove this back in here, and then I'll just reconnect my positive terminal and the ground. Then I've just got to get the seat and the tank back on, and I'm going to make one more modification before we head out for a test ride. There we are. Definitely a different style spline than what's on the XR that's got the little teeny ones. I don't know if this is better or if that would be. I guess it seems like maybe this would be. And it looks like my 2018 does indeed have the seal retainer ring here. On older models, the seal that's in here that basically keeps the engine oil inside and is sort of an interface between the case and the output shaft here, it can actually get blown directly off of that shaft into, I guess, the backside of the sprocket, and then you've got oil pouring out there. So definitely a good thing to install if you don't have one on your older model. I can put a link for it down in the description. I pulled this off though because I'm gonna swap it out for a 14 tooth. This is what I've got on the XR, and both the DR and the XR are geared pretty high from the factory, and either one of them I think you could get away with just the stock gearing if you weren't gonna do too much slow moving single track type stuff, but I've already done that with the XR, and I've got that planned in the next coming weeks for the DR. On this trip, however, I just sort of want to get a feel for how my standard adventure, a 55, 60 mile an hour road, feels when the bike is geared down a bit. It will also, of course, make wheelies a little bit easier and make the bike, well, a little bit more fun to ride at lower speeds. The downside to that, of course, though, is you lose a little bit on the top end, but seeing as both of these run 65, 70, even more than that, absolutely no problem. I don't think this will be a big deal, but we will put a tachometer on this bike at some point and go out and test that. Get this cleaned up a little bit. And again, huge thanks to Rocky Mountain ATV for sending this out to me. If you guys want to pick one up, I can put a link for it down in the description. I believe this old one came off with the boss side towards the bike. And of course, I'm going to put a bit of this on the inside. Of course, don't want too much on there because I don't want to push it back and get it all over the seal. Now, because this is a smaller diameter and one less tooth than the last one, we're going to have an excess amount of chain slack. So that means when I go to adjust the slack, of course, we'll have more. The other thing is this is a little bit of a tighter turn for the chain to make. So technically, this is going to wear the chain out a little bit faster. And that's why a lot of people will leave the stock sprocket up front and put a larger sprocket on the rear. You have to go up a few more teeth, which does sort of mean that then the chain ends up being a bit shorter, but that is the best way to get the longest life out of your chain and sprockets. And if I recall correctly from Jason's bike, I'm actually gonna have to shave the outer lip of this down in order to sort of keep the center retaining ring portion of this, which means also I will have to get rid of this thing. Basically because when I go to try to put this on here, the chain would sort of ride on it, which of course we don't really want. You want the teeth to be fully engaged with the links. So I'm gonna have to shave this down a bit. So there we are. I think that should fit on there quite nicely. I basically just kind of took it down to this sort of cupped edge here, and I think that's about what we needed. We'll get the fasteners back in. First, I'm going to put some more thread locker on them. Certainly don't want these coming out. I think I started getting ready for this ride about an hour ago. I'm still screwing around. Is that any less crooked? Oh, yeah, I think so. So for any of you guys who are unfamiliar with one of these things, it's essentially what you see in most new cars these days with some sort of tech package. It basically just takes information from my phone here and transmits it onto the screen. Only some apps will transfer. We'll be using the Gaia GPS app. Google Maps works okay. It's nice to have the satellite imagery, but this shows the county borders and that sort of thing. With the ATV crew rolling in. So my phone is on the Wi-Fi from the Carpride. That's how those two are connected. And then my Bluetooth is also connected to the Bluetooth on my phone. There's a way to connect your phone to the Carplay unit and then the Carplay unit directly to your Bluetooth comm and a passenger's comm, but I couldn't get my phone to do it for some reason. I don't know if it's just not new enough or what the deal is. I would think that it should be, but I figured I spent more than enough time trying to calibrate the compass on here, which I still don't know if it's right. You have to do it in a figure-8 circle, and I tried it just connected to a power bank, so I had more range of motion, and then when I hooked it back up, it seemed like it wasn't right, but I think maybe I was just being a little hasty, because yeah, now it figured itself out. So maybe it figured out itself right away. I also tried tipping the screen up and driving around in circles, but I think this is probably accurate now. Yeah, it's got to be. That's definitely north. So I don't know if tilting it up at myself is a problem. I guess we'll just kind of see how it goes, but let's get to do some riding, because it is warm. Although first, I set myself up a route here that we're going to try to follow. Whoops. So we'll try to follow my route. It's going to go through the ATV trail, which is not on here, and then eventually it'll link up with some ATV trail that is on the Gaia GPS app. And we will pick the route on my phone and navigate on Android Auto. Whoops. So now it's going to give me turn-by-turn directions up there. Let's say it was going to take me 10 hours? I sure hope not. Alright, so we'll have to keep an eye on that, see what that says. So it's giving me instructions through my Bluetooth headset. Turn that up a little bit. And I can put some information on the comm that I'm using down in the description. I will do a full review on it eventually. Just been kind of testing it out lately, and I definitely am liking it a bit more than anything else I've tried. So I still need to do a bunch more testing, of course, but I've got to say, on the dirt here so far, I'm really liking the 14 tooth. The ride that I took it out for on the road, I'm kind of surprised. I think maybe it's just that the suspension just kind of soaks up some of the grunt that the 14 tooth gave this bike, or some of the grunt that it brought down lower anyway. But it definitely still doesn't feel as torquey as the 701. The 701, of course, it doesn't feel as torquey as the 701. It doesn't feel as torquey as the XR650, which a lot of you guys, when my dad and I were out on some trails that we might see today, actually, we're headed down south towards Harrison Hills, which is disconnected now. It still just doesn't quite seem the same. Like a lot of you guys said that, you know, I'd like it just as much, and I think once it's de-snorkeled and has a pipe on it, and maybe we do some carb mods, it will be closer. But I think, again, it might have more to do with the fact that when you hit the throttle, the back end drops, the front end kind of comes up, and because of that, you just lose some of that, well, possible forward momentum into those other activities that the bike is doing. So definitely does not feel like the XR does, but I mean, it still definitely has more than enough wheelie power now to get me up over these puddles pretty easily. And I definitely like that, because then it keeps my feet and my legs dry. Gets a little bit more traction to that back tire. And well, of course, it's always fun to do a wheelie or two, or 6 or 10. Oh yeah, definitely has a little bit more wheel spin power as well.
Yeah, that is much more effortless, I would say. Much easier to keep it up in the air too. So, whoa! Drifting and wheeling at the same time. That's a new one. Woo! Yeah, it definitely does make this bike a lot more fun, though, I will say that. So on the road, it doesn't feel like the XR, but off the road, it sure feels fun. And what am I in? I'm just in first. Doing about 20, right? Am I in first? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I like that. Okay, well, I guess you guys are right. This bike is a lot more fun to ride with a 14 tooth, especially off-road. And I think I will stiffen up the suspension eventually. But I gotta say, I kind of don't mind the cushy ride. And I mean, that's easy to say, I guess, when I've got the XR at home for a stiff or aggressive ride if I want one. But as much as I think it will be an improvement and make the bike a little bit more sporty feeling to have stiffer suspension, stiffer springs in front and rear, it is, I don't know. It's a fun bike how it is. I didn't realize it wheelied that easy. For some reason out on the road I couldn't tell. And I suppose the other thing that I did since the last long ride that I took it on, or the long test ride that I took it on after I put this stuff on here, I just took it for a quick spin one night. I stuck some rubber strips inside of my cush drive, which isn't necessarily something I'd recommend. I mean, the right thing to do, of course, would be to get, I mean, possibly the $50 polyurethane kit from ProCycle, but it definitely shored up that cush drive. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, there'll be a video on it, if it's not out already. But basically, my rear sprocket just had a bit of slop in it in comparison to where it mates up with the rear wheel. So the chain and wheel were slightly disconnected and had a little bit of slop, and it seems like even just that little bit of sort of shoring up that I did has definitely made this thing feel a little bit more connected to the trail, which I did kind of always notice, and I just figured it was more so because the XR has no cush drive. It's just a hard connection between the hub on the rear wheel and the sprocket and the chain. So seems like that has definitely brought this thing a little bit more in line with that bike, but yet we still have a little bit of cushion in there. Certainly was no slop when I put it back together though. Alright, so I'm gonna go this way. Before we do that, better check to make sure you guys can hear me. Hello? Hello? This thing just keeps automatically answering spam calls? That's super annoying. Let's not do that anymore. So how are we doing here? Yeah, so that's definitely north. That is pretty cool. So we're headed straight south. This isn't going to be obviously super important for me at just a little bit above sea level, but if you are somebody that's going to be doing mountain passes or something, obviously then you want to be able to know whether or not you're at a safe elevation or what elevation you're at. So that'll definitely be a cool thing. I mean, just in general, this is neat. The other difference between this and the other version that I've got on the XR is that this has light sensing, which is just this little sensor right there. And I actually did test that out a little bit 2 nights ago, and that was super nice. I did have to go through the settings on here and change my maps so they would all be in dark mode when it was the right time, and I think maybe I just automatically set them that way, and that definitely helped. This giant big screen was not too bright. Before I changed the maps to night mode, it was, but with it all set up for night, it seems like that definitely dropped the brightness down. And in broad day sunlight, it's overcast today, in broad day sunlight it's plenty bright, so that all definitely works pretty good. I think that really is kind of the extent of the differences between the other version and the Pro version. I mean, obviously some pretty cool things, you know, if you're never going to use them, maybe it's not a big deal. I mean, automatically changing the brightness is kind of cool, but it's not too hard to change it on the other one either. So kind of depends what you're looking for and how much money you want to spend. Yeah, there's probably a setting in here to stop answering spam calls, but I guess they get to hear me motovlog for a while and they accidentally get connected. I really was kind of hoping that I could get this connected in a way where my phone would only have to be connected to the CarPlay unit and not to separately to my Bluetooth communicator, because I think that might help keep the phone a little bit cooler, just because it's running everything through here and it only has to be connected to one thing. So I'm a little disappointed I wasn't able to do that. I mean, I guess I'll have to play around with it a little bit more. Maybe one of you guys can tell me. Got a Motorola Edge, which is actually what I use to film everything these days off of the bike anyway. Whoa, this is quite the trail. DR eats it up pretty good. Bounces around a tad, but that's all right. Looks like we're off of my route a little bit. I had to make some guesstimates as to where the trail was, which was a little bit annoying, but for a completely free app, which does have a paid version, I've got to say this Gaia GPS app is pretty neat, and it certainly is nice that I can do all my sort of route planning from the comfort of, well, the toilet seat this time, but the comfort of, you know, the indoors, whatever. You don't have to be standing out by a hot bike with the unit on and running. You can just do it the night before in a hotel room or in your tent or whatever. I mean, it really is, I mean, I guess anywhere you have signal, that is, it really is kind of neat. I mean, there are definitely some drawbacks to having to be connected to a phone rather than, you know, just being free to go wherever you want, whether you have cell coverage or not. The paid version of Gaia GPS apps will let you download areas, which is, you know, probably something you would want to do, I suppose, if you're really going to be venturing off into the wilderness. For where I am, I pretty much know most of the trails, so it's not a huge deal. And I think maybe that has something to do with my phone heating up, which, yeah, I can tell there is some heat coming off of it in my pocket. Sometimes I let that bother me, sometimes I don't. It's my work phone, and like I said, I record everything or I film everything with it, so it's not the greatest thing to be running it hot all the time. Certainly is going to burn the battery down, but that's why I've got my Tusk jump pack in here and a cable to charge it if I need to. So again, just kind of depends whether you want to mess around with all of that, or if you would just rather have a standalone GPS that's just going to work off the satellites and the information that's on it. Of course, there are certainly some nice things about having information from a phone, like traffic and weather and that sort of thing. So as far as the windshield goes, I should have my high beam on. Oh, I do. Good. Let the UTVs know I'm coming before they hit me. Woo! This did make this bike way more fun. We will be out on 17 for a bit, so I'll take it up to 55, 60, and kind of show you guys the air pocket that it provides. It definitely is, I think, a bit higher than the one on my XR, at least in the comparison where I'm sitting, and I think I did tilt it back towards myself a bit since I filmed it in the garage. I'm really pretty happy with it. We'll see what you guys get for sound and that sort of thing when we're out on the road, but on the trail, the nice thing about having it so close to you versus, say, my old Tenere 700 where it's way out here. I mean, you stand up on that bike and it's still in the way. You stand up on here, and I mean, you guys are more or less seeing what I am, just a couple inches below my eye line, or my line of sight. I mean, it just disappears, and I think that's about what I'm seeing right now. I mean, it's basically just behind the chin bar in my helmet. I mean, it's not really in the way, I mean, much at all, unless I need to see, like, next to my tire, which, I mean, I'm losing so little there that it's not something that I think most people would be concerned about. If you sit down and ride off-road a lot, well, then it's certainly in the way, but technically you really shouldn't be sitting down if you're riding around anything too intense. Of course, if you're somebody that is not able to ride all that intense for one reason or the other, or not able to stand up for a long time, then, you know, maybe you'd want a clear windscreen, or maybe you don't want it at all. But I do really like the fact that, and I like this about all my bikes, that's why I do this, that I can look where I'm going and then just glance just barely down a little bit, see what I need to see, and then look right back up, rather than looking way down here at my handlebars. I think it's really just the way to go. And I mean, this whole setup for that is absolutely perfect. I mean, it gives me exactly what I need. The nice sturdy place to mount the GPS, a nice sturdy place to mount a rally-ish looking windscreen that I don't want to spoil too much, but definitely is pretty nice out on the road. Oh, what a beautiful day for a ride too. A little bit hot, but got all the vents open in the Explorer gear. Woo! And I've got a new set of MSR gloves that I'm testing out here. It's a new version of the Air gloves. I was using the old Air ones, and while they were okay, they weren't nearly as good as these are. I really do like these a lot. And my palms are definitely getting a little bit sweaty. I suppose there are just little tiny breather holes in the bottom parts of these, but the top parts certainly do breathe nice. And of course, having the windshield does block a bit of airflow, as do the adventure guards here. But I'm certainly not feeling too warm, and I definitely still get enough air. Obviously, I just got to stand up a bit, and that helps me get a little bit more air in the vents, which I do have all open. That is a stream crossing I didn't know about. I don't usually go this way on this trail. Oh, that's a cool color. Oh no, I know which stream crossing that is. I've seen that stream before. Oh, I like this bike. We're actually up here on vacation with the whole family. We rented a cabin on a lake, and it didn't properly communicate to my dad that I was bringing my bike, although with all the goofing around I did before the ride, he probably would have been done and ready to go back to fishing or something by the time I got it all ready to go. Is this a guillotine risk? Yes, I think definitely that could certainly be a problem coming down on the bars hard, which it would be nice to move it out a little bit. Why it would be nice to move it out a little bit further, I don't know. At first I was really thinking I was going to. Now I don't really know that I will. It seems like it does a pretty good job exactly where it's at. I mean, it definitely is high, but it's not near as high as like the tall windscreen that I put on the Tenere 700 when I still owned it. That was annoying on the road and was kind of always in my line of sight, where this, I mean, just really isn't. And of course, keep in mind that I'm looking somewhere around here where you guys are a bit lower just because of where the camera's mounted on the helmet. How are we doing? Are we following the route? A little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I almost kind of can feel, the trails are just kind of bumpy, I suppose. I don't know. I feel like maybe I am finally starting to notice some of the negative aspects of the suspension. I think maybe I just had it in my head that it was gonna be so bad that I just was surprised that it wasn't all that bad. And I wouldn't say that it's bad, but certainly isn't the XR. It is a little squishy. Squishy and wallowy, meaning you kind of go over a bump and then you're still kind of feeling the effects of the bump a while after. Oh, and I guess I forgot that the handlebars are a bit higher. I thought that might kind of throw me off, and they certainly are, I guess, a little bit noticeably closer to me, or at least closer to the pegs anyways, which I'm not a huge fan of, but in the attack position, which is of course where you should be with your knees bent and your butt kind of stuck out behind you, hovering over the seat, I mean, then it's really fine. I guess other than being so close to the windshield. And I can still, where I've got everything, as long as there's not a UTV coming, I can certainly still look down and see my navigation for a turn or for the trail or whatever, so that's good. Oh, it smells good. It smells like cedar trees. Yeah, and I'm just in first this whole time. I don't think I've shifted to second at all, which I suppose I'm not going that fast, but it seems like first really works pretty good. See, now I feel like this thing is kind of bright though. So why are you so bright? Yeah, it's on, and I suppose it turned itself down, so that's just all the more it thinks it needs. Oh, yep, there it goes. That's automatic. Yeah, so it's sensing the light and adjusting. Oh, we should check elevation though. 453, 213 degrees, 214 degrees southwest. Perfect, right on course. Yeah, see there, it kind of dips and bounces a bit, but I don't know, what do you expect? It's a comfy plush suspension. Ooh! Rough. So being that I have this wired direct to the battery rather than on some sort of accessory wire or whatever, I do really kind of like that it just stays on. Of course, I have to remember to turn it off, but with that lithium battery in there, it's probably not going to be too big of a deal if I do leave it on. Certainly looks like a rally bike sitting there. I really do like that. I also definitely like the fact that I was able to keep the stock cowling and the stock gauge. Indicator lights are a little bit hard to see, but really not for my position. I mean, it really does all, just fit pretty darn nice together. And now that I've got that angled back a little bit, I almost like it from every position. It really does look cool. Pretty darn happy. Thanks, little tree. Yeah, during this rougher stuff, I can definitely tell that this thing is making me work a little bit harder to keep traction and to keep it upright. I don't usually have to deal with that many whoops, but I think my electrical tape idea didn't also work so well, because maybe that needs to be a little bit tighter. The thing seems to be vibrating its way down a little bit lower than I would like it every once in a while. So what happened? My phone just gave up? I wonder if I did something wrong. Oh, now it's locking on. And there we go. I better get moving. I'm going to miss dinner. What time is it? 5:20. Yep. Bet my wife's wondering where I am. One of my favorite places. That's where I am, honey. I love this bike, too. DR's a good machine. Woo! I always talk about the XR like I like it so much better, and that it's, set up for these type of trails, and I think it is, but it's definitely set up for a much more aggressive rider who doesn't mind it feeling a little bit top heavy, where the DR definitely does not feel top heavy. It's a darn good bike for, I think, somebody that is somewhat new to off-road riding. Or maybe perhaps somebody a little bit bigger that is new to off-road riding. It's certainly not a light dual sport, which is of course what I would suggest to somebody that's new. But that being said, it definitely is a very friendly bike to ride, both on and off the road. It just feels so glued to the trail, and that's exactly why, if you guys have been watching the build series, I decided to lower the XR, which I never thought that I would do or be happy about. But, oh man, that bike, confirmed now by my dad, rides so much better than it used to and feels a lot more like this bike off-road. The smell of this reminds me of my snowmobile a bit. Oh boy, the roads are busy today. Alright, recorded myself an intro. Let's get this battery changed. Do a few more miles on the trails. And then hit the pavement. Ooh, it's a good thing we're on the DR, not the XR. 75 miles beyond reserve. Although, to be completely honest, I'm not exactly sure how many miles I get out of the tank on this before I have to flip to reserve, so we're going to find out. Whoa, it is wet here. Wet and rocky. Yeah, so I suppose if I get far enough back seat to try to get some traction on the rear. Maybe the windshield is in the way a little bit. Not enough to bother me. And of course, anything you do on or off-road oriented, I mean, there's always going to be a trade-off. It was like my favorite part of this trail now. I'm so glad they left the trees that they did. Pretty darn cool. So now we're in second. Whoa, it's rocky. Definitely, I don't know. Seems like there's enough torque for this speed anyway. Whoa! I should take it easy on these rocks. I'm riding like I've got backup. I don't. I guess backup's a little closer than it used to be, but with my crap signal, it's probably not the smartest thing to be doing. Whoa! Either would be launching off of these onto those boulders. Ooh, that might have been near bottom. Yeah, the 14 tooth definitely makes keeping the front end up over the puddles so much less work for my upper body, which is definitely a pleasant thing. Did I lose my tracks? Oh no, am I not supposed to be doing this? I was supposed to get off the trail already, wasn't I? Oh no. What am I thinking? Why am I still on the trail? Where was I supposed to get off? You're gonna be wondering where I am. It is 6 o'clock. Oh, I am miles away from where I'm supposed to be, boys. Oh! Well, yeah, I guess I never checked. I'm supposed to get back on B there. I see the error in my ways now. I'm gonna have to turn around. Crap! Whoops. I saw this intersection and thought, I'm not supposed to be here. Imagine that, getting lost when I'm out testing a GPS. Apparently the thing didn't yell at me enough, and I guess that is kind of a good point. Google Maps will annoy you with redirecting every couple seconds if you venture off of the trail a little bit, where this thing basically, it'll tell you turn-by-turn directions, but then other than that, it basically just says what it tells me now at the upper left there, proceed to the route, which is 1.1 miles away. So if you like to do a little exploring mid-route, and well, you can remember to be responsible, or you've got the time to be irresponsible. Whoa. Come on. This is a horrible place to stop. Losing my camera though. Can the DR get going again on a hill? Oh, the tractor factor. That's Everide for you. Whoa. Yes, if you got the time to wander off your route and it doesn't matter, it's nice to not be annoyed by the Google lady harassing you about deviating from the route that you asked her to lead you on. But if you're on a short, you only have a short time to be out, then well, maybe you should be paying a little closer attention, eh? That's right. We'll get back on the pavement and get back home. Hopefully before we get into too much hot water. A nice family vacation where Dad was lost in the middle of the woods for 4 hours. I really don't miss the XR per se. There's some things that I'm noticing, but it's not like I'm noticing them and trying to tell you how much I dislike it, or that I'm probably sound like I'm complaining about it, but I'm really not meaning for it to be that way. Just things that I'm noticing for those of you who are deciding between the two bikes. As far as just enjoying the ride, oh man, the DR650 is an amazing motorcycle, and I've got to say, as nice as a KLR can be for, as I've always said, even back when I owned one, the right type of person, the DR650 for me personally, I mean, it's just a much better bike for what I want it to do, which is, rip around off-road, it kind of be a hooligan off-road, honestly. Jumps and stuff can definitely be done on a KLR 650, and if you're a bigger dude, a better rider than me, I mean, I'm sure you can whip a KLR probably harder than I can whip a DR or an XR, but if you just want a bike that's fun and easy to ride off-road, this is definitely it in comparison to the KLR. I would much rather ride this bike off-road than a KLR, at least a Gen 2 or especially a Gen 3 any day. And that really shouldn't be any secret. I mean, I never thought that wouldn't be the case back when I was on a KLR. I just wanted to see what they were like to ride off-road and how much I would enjoy or not enjoy really trying to push one. And they certainly are capable bikes, but of course the DR650 is, well, a bit more capable when it comes to off-road, yet still pretty darn comfy on-road. I do have a seat concept seat on here. I've got the bars raised up, the less swept back bars. Of course, my wind protection that, I mean, gives me just a beautiful clean air pocket, so I'm not getting constantly beat up. My coat's not getting beat up. I'm not getting shook all over the place, which if you've never had good wind protection, you probably think, what am I talking about? Why is that a problem? You're on a motorcycle. Of course, you're going to get some wind, right? But if you're going to ride a motorcycle for a really long time, or you value comfort, you value not getting too wind fatigued, and you want a bike that feels a little bit more like a KLR 650 on the pavement, meaning you've got some wind protection and you have a place to put a GPS or a Carplay unit or whatever. I mean, this is a beautiful bike, and I think personally anyways, a beautiful build. I mean, it's not precisely what I was going for, and it's not done yet. I really kind of would have liked to do the big rally dash, but honestly, I mean, this thing, for being 10 times less expensive, I mean, I don't really see any reason not to go with this. And of course, we'll do a much longer test ride, but at the speed limit here, 60 miles an hour, indicated on here, which is probably 5 miles an hour under. And I guess I would hope you guys could hear what I've got for wind noise. The wind hits me. There's a little bit of buffeting right here, clean, buffeted, and it's hitting me kind of at eye level, and then there's clean air above that, and it's really, the buffeting isn't too bad. It's clear from there to there, and it's even a little bit bigger down at the bottom. I mean, it's beautiful, and I can kind of hunker down behind it, and then it's getting shot kind of over my head, basically, just right at the kind of the peak of the helmet. I'll be quiet and maybe you guys can hear the wind difference. I'll do it with the shield closed. So then that's completely free air. We'll do it with the visor open. So that's about where I want to ride, which I anticipate is probably pretty annoying for you guys. That's pretty much straight back, which is probably even worse. And that's clean air. So, I mean, I love it. It'll be interesting to see what my dad thinks. It'll be interesting to see how this compares to the DR. It'll be interesting to see how it compares to the XR. I'm pretty excited about testing these in tandem. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and you are too. If you guys want to pick one of these things up or anything else that I'm using, or you just got to pick up an oil change or something, if you click on one of my links down in the description or in the top pinned comment, that money that they send me for sending you their way will go towards making more videos like this and ensuring that I'm able to keep my dream job. And I definitely appreciate you guys that take the time to click on those links before you do any of your shopping. So huge thanks to you guys, huge thanks to my sponsors, huge thanks to Carpride for sending me these things to test. We will be doing a comparison on them eventually. And thanks to Primary Drive for the 14-tooth sprocket, which I will definitely be doing some more testing on and probably keeping, I would think. Seems to be doing just fine at 60 miles an hour. Until next time, guys, take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out, and enjoy this beautiful world God created for us.